The Tonight Show interview was supposed to celebrate Leanne Morgan's comedy special success. She'd come prepared with her usual self-deprecating humor about Southern life and raising kids, the kind of relatable material that had made her an overnight sensation on social media. But when Jimmy asked what inspired her to start comedy so late in life, her practiced smile wavered for just a moment. It was such an innocent question, the kind every late-blooming performer gets asked. Jimmy expected the usual story about empty nest syndrome, or finally having time to pursue dreams. Instead, he was about to hear something much deeper and more painful. Leanne sat in the blue chair, adjusting her dress nervously. At 50-something, she'd become comedy's overnight sensation after decades of being just a mom. Tonight, she was about to reveal the painful truth behind her late-blooming career. "You know, Jimmy," she began, her Tennessee accent thicker when she was emotional, "everyone thinks I started comedy because my kids got older and I had time. But that's not the real story, and I've never told anyone the real story." Jimmy leaned forward, recognizing the shift from performer to person. His years of hosting had taught him to spot when someone was about to share something profound. "What's the real story, Leanne?" he asked gently. Leanne took a deep breath, looking out at the studio audience before meeting Jimmy's eyes. "I almost left my family," she said simply. "Packed my bags, wrote the note, had one foot out the door." The studio fell quiet in that particular way that happens when someone shares an unexpected truth. The audience could feel the weight behind her words. This wasn't going to be another funny story about suburban life. This was about 15 years ago, Leanne continued, her voice steady but vulnerable. "My youngest was maybe 8, my oldest was heading to college, and I woke up one morning and didn't recognize my own life." Jimmy's expression grew serious as he listened. "What was happening that made you feel that way?" he asked softly. "I'd lost myself completely," she replied, tears beginning to form in her eyes. 25 years of being Chuck's wife and the kids' mom, and I couldn't remember who Leanne was anymore. I'd look in the mirror and see this stranger who looked tired and defeated and angry all the time. It started small," she continued, her voice growing quieter. "Little comments from my husband about how I used to be more fun, how I used to laugh at his jokes. My kids would ask why I was always so serious, why I didn't smile like other moms." She paused, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'd go to bed every night wondering what happened to the girl who used to make her friends laugh until their stomachs hurt. Where did she go? When did I become this bitter, resentful woman who resented her own family?" She paused, gathering the courage to continue. "I felt invisible in my own home, like a housekeeper who just happened to live there," she continued, the pain evident in her voice. "My husband would come home from work and barely acknowledge me except to ask what was for dinner. My kids would talk around me, not to me. I'd make these elaborate meals nobody thanked me for. Clean messes nobody noticed I'd cleaned," she added, her voice growing stronger with the telling. "I'd do load after load of laundry, and the only time anyone spoke to me was when they couldn't find their favorite shirt." She looked directly at Jimmy, then at the audience. "I started having these thoughts, these scary thoughts, about what would happen if I just disappeared. Would they even notice I was gone, or would they just wonder who was gonna make dinner?" The camera caught the pain in her expression as she relived those dark days. "I'd stand in my kitchen making breakfast and think, is this all there is? Is this how I spend the next 30 years? Jimmy moved from behind his desk to sit closer to her. "That sounds incredibly isolating," he said with genuine compassion. "It was," Leanne nodded, wiping her eyes. "And the worst part was feeling guilty for wanting more. Like, what kind of ungrateful woman leaves a good man and beautiful children because she's bored?" "But it wasn't boredom," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "It was suffocation. I was drowning in my own life and didn't know how to ask for help." Jimmy handed her a tissue. "What happened the day you packed your bags?" he asked gently. "I'd made this whole plan," Leanne admitted, her voice cracking with the weight of the memory. "I was going to drive to my sister's in Alabama, figure out my life from there. I had my suitcase in the car, a note on the kitchen counter explaining that I needed time to find myself. The note was 2 pages long, she continued, tears flowing more freely now. I kept trying to explain why I was leaving without making them feel like it was their fault. How do you tell your family you love them but you're drowning in that love? She paused, gathering herself before continuing. I'd even called my sister, told her I was coming for a visit. She knew something was wrong, but didn't push. Southern women, we're good at reading between the lines. The studio was completely silent except for the soft sounds of people in the audience getting emotional. I was sitting in my driveway, keys in my hand, when my 8-year-old came running out. She didn't know what was happening, just saw Mommy crying in the car. Leanne continued through tears. She climbed in and said, "Mommy, tell me a funny story." And I looked at this beautiful little face, so trusting, so sure that Mommy could fix anything with a silly voice and a made-up story. I realized in that moment that she didn't see the bitter, angry woman I thought I'd become. She added, her voice growing softer. She just saw Mommy. The same Mommy who used to do voices for all her stuffed animals, who made up songs about vegetables to get her to eat dinner. Jimmy's eyes were visibly watering as he listened. "What was going through your mind in that moment?" he asked gently. Jimmy's eyes were visibly watering as he listened. "What was going through your mind in that moment?" he asked gently. "That I was about to abandon the only people who still believed I was worth loving." Leanne replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "That I was so focused on what I'd lost, that I couldn't see what I still had. That maybe the problem wasn't my family, maybe it was me. I tried," Leanne said with a small smile through her tears. "I started making up this ridiculous story about our cat becoming a superhero who saved the neighborhood from evil vacuum cleaners, and she laughed. Really laughed, that deep belly laugh that kids do." In that moment, hearing her giggle, I realized I had 2 choices, she continued. I could leave my family, or I could find a way to laugh again myself. The camera stayed focused on her face as she gathered her thoughts. That's when I decided to try comedy. Not to become famous, just to remember how to be funny. Jimmy leaned forward with interest. "How did you make that transition from that dark moment to performing?" "I started small," Leanne replied, her voice growing more confident as she moved into safer territory. "Open mic nights at the local coffee shop, church talent shows, anywhere they'd let a middle-aged housewife get on stage and talk about the absurdity of suburban life. My first performance was at our church's talent night," she continued with a laugh. "I did 5 minutes about trying to understand my teenager's text messages. I got 3 actual laughs and thought I was Jerry Seinfeld. The funny thing about being a middle-aged Southern woman," she continued, finding her comedic rhythm again, "is that everything is material. Grocery shopping becomes a social anthropology study. Parent-teacher conferences become exercises in diplomatic immunity. Trying to figure out technology becomes performance art." The audience was laughing now, and Leanne's entire demeanor brightened. I realized I had 25 years of material just sitting there in my kitchen, in my minivan, in my brain. All those moments I thought were just drudgery were actually comedy gold. The audience laughed, and Leanne's face lit up at the sound. That feeling, making people laugh, it reminded me I was still in there somewhere. Leanne wasn't gone, she was just buried under a pile of laundry and carpool schedules. Jimmy smiled warmly. "How did your family react to this new version of you?" "My husband was confused at first," Leanne admitted with a chuckle. "He'd come home, and I'd be practicing material instead of folding clothes, talking to myself in the kitchen, working out timing and punchlines. He thought I was having some kind of midlife breakdown, and maybe I was," she added with a grin. "But it was the good kind of breakdown, the kind that breaks you open instead of breaking you down. Chuck started coming to my shows after about a month," she continued, her voice warming with affection. "At first I think he was just making sure I wasn't embarrassing the family, but then he saw how the audience responded, how happy I was up there. The night he laughed at one of my jokes about him, really laughed, not that polite husband laugh. "That's when I knew we were going to be okay," she said, wiping happy tears from her eyes. "My kids thought it was weird that Mom was suddenly telling jokes on stage," she continued. "But they also saw me laughing again, really laughing, for the first time in years." "The real breakthrough came about 6 months later," she said, her voice full of emotion. "My youngest came up to me after a show and said, 'Mommy, you're funny again.'" Jimmy wiped his eyes, clearly moved by her story. "And your marriage? How did comedy affect your relationship?" "It saved us," Leanne said without hesitation. "Comedy didn't just give me back myself, it gave Chuck back his wife. We'd forgotten how to have fun together. Now he's my biggest fan and harshest critic," she added with a laugh. "He'll tell me which jokes work and which ones don't. Turns out he's got pretty good timing himself." Jimmy turned to address the camera. "What Leanne is sharing is incredibly brave. The idea that it's okay to want more from life, even when you have everything you're supposed to want. The thing is," Leanne continued, finding her voice as an advocate, "I think a lot of women my age go through this. We give everything to everyone else and lose ourselves in the process." She looked directly into the camera. "If you're watching this and you feel invisible in your own life, please know you're not alone. And please know it's never too late to find yourself again. Comedy was my way out," she added. "But it doesn't have to be comedy. It can be painting, writing, starting a business, going back to school. Anything that reminds you who you are." Jimmy stood up and helped Leanne to her feet. "Leanne Morgan, everyone," he announced. "A woman who almost left her family and instead found a way to save it." The audience rose in thunderous applause, but it was different from typical entertainment applause. This was recognition of courage, of transformation, of someone who chose growth over giving up. As the show ended, Jimmy kept his arm around Leanne's shoulders. "Thank you for sharing something so personal," he whispered. "You just gave a lot of people permission to find themselves again." 6 months later, Leanne partnered with marriage counselors to create comedy therapy workshops for couples struggling with similar issues. Her program, Laughing Back to Love, helped countless couples rediscover joy and connection in their relationships through humor and honest communication. The interview became one of the most shared clips in Tonight Show history, viewed over 10 million times across platforms. Women across the country reached out, sharing their own stories of feeling lost in their roles as wives and mothers, of contemplating leaving their families to find themselves. Leanne received thousands of messages from women who said her honesty gave them courage to pursue their own dreams. Several started comedy classes, others went back to school. Many simply had honest conversations with their families about their needs and dreams they'd set aside. Her husband Chuck became a regular part of her act, joining her on stage to share his perspective on their journey from crisis to comedy. Their marriage became stronger than it had ever been, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine friendship rather than just duty and routine. The woman who once packed her bags to leave became the voice for women who refused to disappear into their roles. Her comedy specials consistently rank among the most watched, not just for the laughs, but for the recognition women feel seeing their own struggles reflected with humor and hope. Today, Leanne travels the country performing and speaking about finding yourself at any age. Her message resonates with audiences who see their own struggles reflected in her story. The woman who once packed her bags to leave became the voice for women who refuse to disappear. Sometimes the funniest people really are fighting the biggest battles. And sometimes comedy is the bridge that leads you home to yourself. Her suitcase from that day still sits in her closet, now filled with fan letters instead of escape plans. Because sometimes the breakdown you think will destroy you becomes the breakthrough that saves everything you love.